Well, we're working with a mob from Elcho Island, about 15 Yolnu people who've come down from Elcho to do a show which we're putting together for Sydney for the Adelaide Festival, and then it goes to the Sydney Opera House and Malthouse in Melbourne. It's been a total dream here for us. Can't really believe we've landed in such an amazing place. Most of the work on this we've tried to do up in Elcho to date, the expositions. But there's the housing situation there is really chronic, and there's not really enough. There's 25 people to a house, so it's hard to find somewhere to rehearse. And the food situation's pretty bad up there, so people aren't really well fed. And there's a lot of other sort of issues in the community. And at the same time, we really didn't want to go to the city. We thought the stress of the city and a lot of the issues, trying to keep everyone's focus on the work was quite tough. We did do a week in Melbourne, which was all right, but we had its moments. And to come to this totally stunning, beautiful place, and to have all of the Chooky and Yolnu team here, plus our creatives all living together, and to be able to rehearse during the day and come back the evening to the cottage we're living in, and be able to cut the film and work on the soundtrack and all of that, all in one place with this sense of peace and calm, has really been fantastic. I've been making theatre for 30-40 years now, and I've really never ever had a chance to work in such an ideal spot for an artist. It's some kind of dream made come true, and you sort of feel that spirit of the Boyd family just sort of really nurturing us. And in terms of the boys themselves, it's really been quite moving to see the sort of transformation that they've undergone in the last 3 weeks, just to give them a place where they're getting really decent food and not living on Coca-Cola and white bread, and to see what that's done to their energy and to their focus and their concentration. Really, to be honest, from going, just always hugely, wonderfully talented, but often it felt like it's a tricky area to work in, to get everybody kind of concentrating at one point in time or turning up. And here, every single morning without exception, they've been kind of sitting out at the rehearsal room at 15 minutes beforehand, ready to start and work. It's like working with a sort of dream professional team in terms of their focus, and in terms of how much we can get done in the day, how much they remember things, just how gorgeous they are to one another, and just to take them away from the issues of people dying all the time and people being hungry and sort of violence and people rushing off from the bush with a rope to stick around their neck and all those things that we got really used to up there. And to have this space in their life, it's been really fantastic. The story, this is sort of based on the Chooky Dancers. They did this up on their community on the basketball court, the community disco. They did a show. They did a little flip to thank this Greek nurse who looked after this sick child up there. They decided to do a sort of Yolnu version of Zorba the Greek, and which sort of mixes the sort of break dancing and indigenous dance that they fused together with Zorba, a sort of techno version of Zorba. And so that some of their mates could see it in Darwin, they put it on YouTube. And I thought they'd just be fantastic to come down and be in the Sydney Festival. And we asked them down to come and open the Sydney Festival, which they did, and that's when I got to know them. So then I went back up to Galawinku. The guy, not untypically of this, the reality in this for this community. Frank, the beautiful man who sort of founded the Chookies and who's the dad to some of these boys, he actually got sick shortly afterwards and died 3 months into the project, which was, obviously an enormous loss to his family and in a smaller way, but fundamental way to the project. But anyway, we're going back up there and having known them in their hotel, the 4-star hotel we put them up in Sydney, and then going back and just seeing the fact that they all sleep on the floor with 10, 15 people to a room. we were really struck just by the incredible kind of parallel lives they have to live in, and also the Chookies came from this amazing, which is featured in the show, this amazing sort of, the Chooky Dancers were born of the Friday night Galawinku disco, which is a mad event. And of course that's all bounce and YouTube and MTV and all about sex and skin and youth and and freedom and personal expression and sex I suppose. But in Yolngu society, who you can speak to and who you can be with and who you can relate with, is extremely strictly codified, and the whole world actually is split into two halves, into Yirija and Dua, and a Dua person, a Dua girl, can only marry a Yirija man, and vice versa. So that means half the world, is kind of, you can't have a relationship with a man and a woman. And then there are all sorts of other kind of, very strict kind of rules and arranged marriages and stuff. And that system is absolutely central to the very kind of existence of Yolngu culture, that those two halves that form the world, and the fact that every union has to be both halves. So every song that is sung is either a Yirija or a Dua song, but to sing the Yirija song, the person who sings the song has also got to have a Dua person who's the guardian of that song as it's sung. So it's like there are two halves in the world, and that union of them and the keep them coming back together is how the whole creation exists. So for a young boy and a girl to fancy one another and go off, to Yirija to go off, and to have what, like a love match, that's called Nurul Nilma Miriu. That means follow your senses and your heart and your desire and your senses, and you're nothing. Miriu means nothing. It means you no longer exist in the scheme of the planet. It's so that point at where Western society meets, and where Yolngu culture meet, this business of wrong skin, is really, sort of one of the kind of cutting points of this, the pressures of these two societies. So while the whole show looks at the Chookies' lives and is in many ways joyous, it's also about the just totally unacceptable way that people are living and dying in those communities. And that story, like a Romeo and Juliet story, is kind of told out through the show. And one thing today, like the one thing that everybody has, and that is a bit like a spear or a dilly bag you have all the time because it carries all your tools, is a mobile phone. That is the sort of, and often people only have credit on it, maybe on payday, but they've got their music and they've got their video shots that they sort of exchange, their little film clips and all of that, and games and light and a little camera to perform in front of and swap with your friends. So as well as having got into taking all this sort of culture, musical culture, and mashing it up, they've started mashing up the visual world. So you've got, they've taken, well, that's fantastic. They've taken a Wallet and Gromit sort of barnyard animal meeting. These are the boys, and they've gone and dubbed it into Yolngu as a land rights meeting. So the donkey gets up and says, "This is my bit of land and my people," and then the chicken says, "What are you saying?" And it's all done in Yolngu. They've taken Taiwanese martial art videos and translated that into a sort of domestic brawl and stuff. So we do the Romeo and Juliet story, but it's told a lot with sort of YouTube footage as sort of counteracting it as well, and indeed the way that the Romeo and Juliet story, it started off as a Renaissance story, and then this Shakespeare got hold, nicked it, and sort of changed it, and then Bernstein nicked it and turned it into West Side Story, and then Baz Luhrmann did it as a rap film, and so now we actually use sequences. They click on their phones, and there are little sequences from West Side Story which quickly get adapted. So as the Puerto Ricans are saying, hurricanes blowing, populations growing, every money owing, all the natives steaming, which is the lines from the West Side Story. We translate that into Yolngu, sort of as these kids kind of being attracted to American culture. So it's a kind of mash-up sort of these worlds to tell this story of this couple who kind of basically fall in love on the Elcho dance floor, which gives us a chance to feature a lot of the amazing footage of the Elcho disco, and they have these assignations, sort of secretly, and then they're discovered, and there's a hunt across the island, and then his brother, intervenes and gets stabbed, so it follows the bit like West Side Story. It follows the Romeo and Juliet story when it's convenient to us, and at the end of the show, they have to choose really between heart, a sort of personal idea of heart and love, or a more collective idea of heart and love in terms of the survival of your clan and your community and your people and all of that, is where you place your part, and you sometimes have to sacrifice, that view of our own society, which is a very individualized way of sort of personal need and love and desire. So, and it's it sort of hovers at the end of the show between that question that in many ways hovers in this community.